Hi, my name is Jayreid. I'm a psychotherapist in San Francisco, California. And today I'd like to talk about knowing that there's nothing wrong with how you love other people after narcissistic abuse. So in today's video, I'd like to talk about another way that a narcissistic parent or partner can damage one's sense of self and offer some thoughts for healing. So to begin, again, I just want to quickly review, I think, a narcissistic individual psychology and how that psychology so often results in psychological, emotional, often other types of abuse for the survivor of being in relationship to someone who's has this type of psychology. So, to begin with, I think the narcissistic person has a deep sense of worthlessness, which gets denied, and its opposite insisted upon. That in fact, no, they're better and more important than others. And that felt worthlessness needs to get relocated to someone else, which often, if the narcissist is a parent in the family, then it's often either the spouse or the child who can often be the receptacle for the narcissistic parent's own worthlessness. And they do this in a particular type of way, where the narcissistic, parent will engage in a process of like perceiving reasons for the child's worthlessness, and then subtly acting in ways that get that child to act in compliance with these supposed reasons for that child's worthlessness. So, for example, a narcissistic parent intent on scapegoating a child for being just, in essence, let's say, bad and the worthless one, that parent may go around the house looking for reasons to berate, attack, and devalue that child. Like, did my son or daughter leave their toys out? Did they, leave a light on? And those, I guess you could say, in any household might be grounds to kind of for a gentle reprimand by a parent, like, hey, could you put your shoes away, or hey, don't forget to turn the lights off. But in these cases, it's often such very minor offenses get overblown into kind of like accusations that you don't care about the family, you don't care about the narcissistic parent maybe saying you don't care about me, you don't respect me, and now you're going to get it. And so those types of episodes, I think, really reflect the compulsion the narcissistic parent experiences to shed their own sense of worthlessness and find it in essence, their victim, or in this case, I'm talking about the child who's being thrust into the role of the scapegoat. And so in these videos, I've talked a lot about how the narcissistic parent, can abuse a scapegoated child to think of him or herself as less valuable, undeserving, and defective. That's really focusing on the child thinking of who he or she is, to oneself, and to some extent to others. But another facet of this form of abuse is the implicit message that the way the child attempts to love others is faulty or broken. I think children not only have a basic need to know they're lovable, but also that their love for others is valued and effective. That when they set about to love someone else, in essence, it works. So in a good enough sort of family, you could imagine a child saying, "Oh, I love you, Mom or Dad," and that parent then picking up the child and saying, "I know you do." And what the parent is conveying is that the parent receives, and if in an effective manner receives the child's love and cherishes that love, that it's precious to that parent, just as I think the child experiences the parent's love as precious to him or her. So that really sets the ground for a sense of mutuality and reciprocity in intimate relationships. Because in these, good enough circumstances, the child learns that, yes, he or she is lovable, and he or she can love other people in a way that results in them feeling loved. One of the traumas of kind of being, I think, narcissistically abused, particularly by a parent and certainly by a partner, is that you receive the message that try as you might to love that parent or partner seems to never feel loved by you, and it's your fault. So like, for example, that child under attack by the narcissistic parent who's sort of, on the warpath to find reasons to attack them, that child knows that in that moment, there's no kind or loving thing that he or she can say or do that will shift that parent's hostility or aggression at the child in those moments, probably outside those moments too. So, for what the child's going to conclude in those moments is not that, he or she's dealing with a monster for a parent, but rather that his or her ability to love that parent is what's wrong, is the problem. That only if, the child's ability to love were better, then he could change that parent's, in essence, it seems in these cases, sort of hatred into love. But again, it's because of the very vulnerable position that the child is in to the narcissistic parent. And often even if you're in a relationship with someone who's narcissistic, they can end up feeling this way too, that one feels very sort of vulnerable to the narcissist assessment of their ability to love that narcissistic person. Another way that the survivor's ability to love also gets attacked, I think, is when the narcissistic individual, parent or partner, accuses the survivor of being selfish and not caring about the narcissistic person. So I think, there's a lot of sort of distorting of what's actually going on when this type of messaging happens. And so, because first of all, the survivor, I think, knows deep down in their bones that trying to monitor and anticipate and care for the needs of the narcissistic parent or partner is a full-time job. And it's also sort of a staying afloat endeavor, because nothing ever seems to kind of stick with the narcissistic person, that the survivor is always left feeling like one hasn't yet done enough for the narcissistic person, and or it may seem like one has done enough, but sooner than later one will come to find out that there's something they haven't done, or one way they again failed that narcissistic parent or partner. And if you're somewhat in essence stuck in a relationship with this narcissistic person, then in order to share reality with that individual, then you have to believe that you're incapable of loving in the way that narcissistic person deserves to be loved. And I say narcissistic person now, but often when in the throes of this sort of abuse, one likely doesn't think of, certainly the child doesn't think of the parent as narcissistic. It's just mom or dad. Similarly with a partner. It's only, again, once distance gets to be gained that, we can talk about, oh, this is what a narcissistic parent or partner is doing, and relate that to your own experience. But again, in order to be in that relationship, one has to believe that that you're the problem for not being able to love this other person the way he or she deserves to be loved. Meanwhile, and importantly so, the opposite question never gets to be posed nor answered, like, hey, how well is mom or dad making me feel loved? Or is this partner making me feel loved? Because there's so much, I think one of the reasons is there's so much focus and attack on the survivor's heavy inability to love the narcissist the way he or she deserves, that it's almost, the implication is that, well, you are so defective in your ability to love that you don't deserve for me to love you. And that's another kind of very onerous belief one has to carry often in relationship to the narcissistic, again, parent or partner. So now if this kind of resonates and has been part of your experience, I just want to offer some thoughts to kind of help to begin to challenge this, or at least lay out what I think is some of the process that can be helpful in ultimately challenging it. And I'll just start with the fact that the opposite was actually true. That, if this has been one's experience, that it's often that one was actually quite good at offering care and loving other people. and that it's only by virtue of being so good and plentiful in this regard as a person that one was able to hang in there with the narcissist to try to keep kind of giving him or her what he or she claimed to need. One can often come out of a relationship with a narcissist believing that one has problems with being empathic with others, or inevitably will be found to be selfish by someone they get close to. And again, it's usually the opposite that's true, that one actually possesses more empathy, more sort of instincts to care for others, but have just received the opposite message due, again, to the narcissistic parent or partner's own psychopathology. And lastly, one of the reasons to kind of maybe think about in trying to kind of restore kind of one's sense of the reality of what was survived is that, it may actually be one's own ability to love and care for others that what was targeted by the narcissist, because that narcissistic parent or partner felt threatened by that. I mentioned in the video on the altruistic narcissist that there's this sort of pseudo-identity by the altruistic narcissist that says, hey, I'm the most caring, the most loving. But it's sort of a way to kind of inflate him or herself from that sense of worthlessness. And it's also not genuine because it just can't be often, because the sense of worthlessness is so dire that this identity is really one that's sort of used to coerce others to regard that person as this all-loving, all-caring person, not out of a genuine desire or sense of gratification from connecting to and helping others feel better or feel cared for or understood. And so how might one go about recovering the sort of good truth about your ability to love and care for others? And I think I think I say this a lot, but it's I think comes down to the two most important things in recovery from narcissistic abuse, which is gaining distance from that parent or partner, and in the case of the parent, the family system, psychological, emotional, sometimes physical distance, and involving oneself in relationships with good, safe other people. And the video on how to identify safe people, I'd recommend to kind of speak more to how to do that, how to find people who are safe, and what do those people look like and kind of feel like in friendships and relationships. And as that happens and it gets accrued, it gets to be more believable that one's ability to love other people is just fine. As you participate in relationships with good, safe other people, and again, this is over time, then the contrast with how you were treated and received by the narcissistic parent or partner often just sort of reveals itself. Like, I'm doing the exact same things that were met with, outrage and indignation of how could I be so thoughtless and this or that. And with this other sort of safe person, they seem very touched by this, or it seems to be a very meaningful act that I'm taking with them, and they seem very appreciative and valuing of that. And as those kinds of latter experiences accrue, it again just brings into contrast the sort of distorted reality that was lived in relationship to that narcissistic person. And then as time continues to elapse with the distance and the safe others being present, I think that the conclusion that the opposite was always true with the narcissistic parent or person gets to reveal itself. And that is that you were the one who was always the loving and caring one. And it was the narcissistic parent or person who was utterly unable to love or care for you. And I would say anyone else for that matter. And I think one way to kind of remind oneself or facilitate getting to that conclusion is really asking oneself, did I feel loved by the narcissistic person? Rather than trying to hold up examples of them sort of acting in loving ways towards you, because that's really the crux of it. When it's hard to sort of deny that one did not feel loved in relationship to a narcissistically abusive person. And as that gets to be the sort of the holy grail, in essence, how you feel in relation to others, then this sort of truth, I think, gets to reveal itself more and more. Well, thank you again for tuning in this week. It means a tremendous amount to read the comments that people have taken the time to submit. Again, supporting some of the content here, offering your own experience with it, and often some really thought-provoking either modifications to some of this content, or sometimes some important challenges to some of the points made. And so it's all welcome, and I again very much appreciate it. And I hope everyone's well, and look forward to posting again next week, Sunday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Take care.